There's a number that defines modern financial life. It haunts you, whether you realize it or not. It's not the size of your salary. It's not how much you have in the bank. It's how much of your paycheck disappears into a system designed to make you feel responsible for your own collapse. In 1980, the average American needed 5 years of work to afford a house. Last year, it took closer to 10. The math didn't change because you got worse with money. It changed because something else changed. And if you've been doing everything right, saving, not taking risks, staying careful, you're about to find out why that strategy has become a trap. But before we get there, understand this. You're not failing. The system beneath your feet is failing. And it's trying very hard to make that failure feel like your fault. This isn't a story about get-rich-quick schemes. It's worse than that. It's about what happens when being prudent becomes a form of surrender. And more importantly, it's about why the people who told you to be prudent are no longer following their own advice. Let me introduce you to Marcus. He's a composite of thousands of people who've contacted me with the same question. Why am I doing everything right but going backward? Marcus makes $80,000 a year. He's never missed a rent payment, never carried credit card debt. He has 6 months of emergency savings in a high-yield savings account, earning 4.5%. He reads the finance blogs. He listens to the podcasts. He does exactly what every reputable source tells him to do. By every mainstream metric, Marcus is financially responsible. But here's what keeps him awake at 3 in the morning. His rent is $1,900. It was $1,400 5 years ago. His groceries cost 40% more than they did in 2019. His car insurance doubled. Coffee went from $2 to $4.50. His phone bill crept up another $12 last month. And his salary, adjusted for inflation, has gone up by roughly 3% in the same period. Marcus did the math. He did it multiple times. He needed to be sure he wasn't missing something. If he continues this trajectory, he will never own a home. The gap isn't closing, it's widening. And the thing that haunts him most is this. He's not being reckless. He's not gambling. He's not ignoring reality. He's being punished for being careful. His parents owned homes on single incomes. His grandparents owned multiple properties, and they were less cautious than him. They borrowed more. They took bigger risks. They won. Marcus is winning according to every metric, and he's losing everything. Here's what nobody tells you about modern money. Money isn't neutral. It has weight. It degrades. And the longer you hold it in its simplest form, the more it costs you. Let me show you how. In 2020, the Federal Reserve essentially hit a button. They pumped trillions of dollars into the economy. On paper, this was emergency stimulus, essential, temporary. In reality, it was the beginning of a massive transfer, not of money, of value. And not because of corruption or conspiracy, but because of mathematics. When you create more money without creating more goods and services, each unit of that money is worth a little less. This is called inflation. But here's the part they downplay. Inflation doesn't affect everyone equally. If you own assets, real estate, stocks, land, even fine art, inflation is your friend. Your house worth $300,000 5 years ago? It's probably worth $450 now. You didn't do anything special. You didn't work harder. You didn't innovate. The currency devalued, so hard assets went up to match. You won. By accident, or more accurately, by privilege. But if you're Marcus, holding your cash in a savings account earning 4.5%, while inflation runs at 3.2%, you're gaining 1.3% per year. Sounds fine.
On paper, it even sounds conservative and responsible. It's not, because that math assumes you're just sitting still. You're not. You're drowning. Very slowly, invisibly, in a way that feels like your fault. The person who borrowed $300,000 to buy that house in 2020 made a decision. They took on debt. They made monthly payments that hurt. Every month, they wrote a check that felt expensive. But something was happening that they might not have fully understood. They borrowed expensive money, $300,000 in 2020 dollars. They're now repaying that loan with dollars that are worth less, $2025, $2026. They borrowed when money was valuable. They're repaying when money is cheap. They won. Intentionally or not, their bet paid off. The person who saved? They did it right. They were responsible. They held cheap money. They waited. They believed in the process. And for that responsibility, for that belief, they got poorer. This is the trap, and it's not an accident. It's mathematics embedded in the structure of the system itself. Here's something that will sound strange. For most of the 20th century, this trap didn't exist, or rather, it existed in a different form. After World War II, inflation was the public enemy number one. The government actually prioritized stable currency. They didn't just talk about it, they structured the entire system around it. Interest rates were allowed to rise whenever inflation appeared. If you saved money, the returns kept pace with inflation. A savings account in 1975 could earn 8, sometimes 10%. This wasn't generous, it wasn't special, it was normal, it was fair, it was how the system was built. Being careful made sense. You weren't being punished, you were being rewarded. Around 1880, things shifted. Paul Volcker, the Federal Reserve Chairman, made a choice to crush inflation through historically aggressive interest rate hikes. He raised rates into the high double digits. Mortgages hit 18%. It was brutal, painful, but it worked. Inflation died, and it stayed dead for 40 years. And something dangerous happened in that dead time. We built an entire financial system that depended on money being essentially free. Mortgages got bigger because lenders could offer cheap rates. Student loans exploded. Corporate debt went vertical. Venture capital pumped billions into companies losing money because borrowed money had almost no cost. Entire asset classes, cryptocurrencies, unprofitable tech companies, meme stocks could only exist because money had almost no cost. This world only works if assets keep going up, which means this world only works if the currency keeps getting weaker. And that's fine if you own assets. It's catastrophic if you don't. In 2022, inflation came back. Not because of poor planning or external shocks, because the system finally broke under its own contradictions. You can't create trillions of dollars indefinitely and expect currency to remain stable. The math catches up. And the government's response was immediate. Lower interest rates again, pump more money, start buying assets, buy bonds, buy corporate debt, inject liquidity. They chose the inflation path over the deflation path. They chose the path that helps asset owners. And when you understand why they made this choice, you understand why Marcus is stuck.
The system is no longer designed to reward patience. It's designed to punish it. And I want to show you exactly what that punishment looks like. Here's the cold calculation. Let's say you save 30% of your income. You're Marcus, 80 grand a year. After taxes, you're taking home roughly 60. You save 18,000 of that. After 10 years, you have $180,000 saved. You never touched it. You were perfect. You went to bed every night knowing you were doing the right thing. But inflation over that decade ran at an average of 3.5%. Not high, historical average, maybe even conservative. Your $180,000 now has the purchasing power of roughly $135,000. You lost 45 grand in value, quietly, while you slept,
by keeping it safe. Now look at your colleague, Jake. Same 80 grand a year. Jake saved nothing. Instead, he did something that terrified him. He took out a $400,000 mortgage in year one, 90% loan to value, maximum leverage. He bought a house in a neighborhood everyone said was about to change. His monthly payment was $2,300. It hurt. Every month felt like a punch. He stretched to make it work. His wife worried. His friends thought he was insane. 10 years later, his house is worth $720. His loan is down to $250. His net worth is roughly $470. He created wealth, not through skill, not through luck, through leverage during inflation and patience. Marcus has $135 in purchasing power and no assets. Jake has $470 in actual assets that continued to appreciate. Marcus was careful. Jake was aggressive. In a deflationary currency world, they'd both win. In an inflationary one, there's only one winner, and it's not the person who made the smart choice. It's the person who understood the game. And this calculus works for almost every asset class: stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency, even collectibles. You want to see it in stocks? Take someone who invested their money in the S&P 500 in 2010. They did okay, not amazing, maybe 5–6% annual returns after fees. But they borrowed nothing. They were conservative. They diversified. They did everything right. Now take someone who borrowed to buy a handful of individual stocks. They leveraged their position. They took on margin debt. They scared themselves repeatedly. And if they were in tech, if they had conviction, they're up 700% or more. Not all of them won. Some lost everything. But the ones who won so much larger than the careful person that the math is unavoidable. The rule is consistent. Leverage during inflation plus patience equals enormous wealth. Caution during inflation equals getting slowly erased from the game. You don't lose everything at once. That would be obvious. You lose it gradually enough that you blame yourself. Now understand what this means at scale. A generation of people have been told to save, to be responsible, to not speculate, to keep their emergency fund in liquid cash, to pay off debt fast, to avoid risk, to be careful. This advice is being delivered by a system that has structurally punished every single one of these behaviors for the last decade, and it will probably continue to punish them. It's not that the advice is bad in a vacuum. In a stable currency environment, in a world with zero inflation, the advice is sensible. It's that the advice is catastrophically mismatched to the environment we actually live in. Giving someone a winter coat in the Sahara isn't thoughtful. It's sabotage, even if it sounds right, even if it comes from people who mean well. The wealthy understood this shift. They borrowed at low rates when rates were low. They bought assets before the inflation hit. They structured their lives around leverage. They took on debt strategically. They're not smarter than Marcus. They're not better at math. They're just playing a different game. Meanwhile, millions of careful people are losing ground because they're playing a game that hasn't existed for years, but nobody told them the rules changed. Or rather, people did tell them. Economists warned. Some financial writers sounded the alarm. But the official advice from institutions, banks, schools, government agencies continued to preach the old gospel. The question isn't, how do you get richer? The question is this: how do you stay in the game at all when the game is designed to slowly eliminate everyone playing it carefully? How do you participate in an inflationary system without taking on leverage? How do you keep savings in a currency that's designed to depreciate? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the real problem. There's something else happening, too. Something that makes this trap exponentially worse as time passes. The longer caution works, the harder the reversal becomes. If you spent your 20s being careful, you're now in your 30s or 40s trying to catch up. The amount of capital you'd need to deploy, the risk you'd need to take, it's exponentially higher. Jake took his risk in his 20s when failure would have hurt but not destroyed him. He had time to recover. If Marcus tries to replicate Jake's strategy now, he can't borrow 400 grand anymore. He might only qualify for 200. And he doesn't have 10 years, he has 15 years until retirement. The math gets harder every year he waits. And the system knows this, so it offers you something. A 401k, an IRA, Social Security, long-term bonds, slow, patient investments, things that work great if inflation stays near zero and you have 40 years of compounding ahead of you. Things that sound secure. But if inflation averages 3.5% and you only have 15 years to retirement, if you're trying to accumulate enough wealth to stop working and inflation is silently eroding your purchasing power every single year, then the math breaks. It all breaks. This is the real trap. Not that the system is intentionally evil, not that it's a conscious conspiracy. It's worse. It's structural. It's mathematics embedded so deep in the system that nobody even questions it anymore. And it's been operating for so long that we've forgotten it was ever any different. Marcus didn't fail. The strategy failed. The environment changed, and nobody updated the manual. Or they did, but only the people who could afford to hire advisors found out about it. The uncomfortable question isn't how to be more careful. It's whether, in an inflationary era, extreme caution is actually a kind of risk, a hidden kind, the kind nobody talks about because it looks responsible. And if it is, what does that mean for everyone who was told they were doing everything right? Because the advice was sincere, the people giving it believed it. But sincerity doesn't change mathematics, and mathematics doesn't care about your intentions.